Let's show my screen and get started. Okay, welcome everyone. Let's see, slideshow. Nope, don't want to leave the webinar, I want to minimize. Okay. How's that? Slide up, the first slide is on the screen?
Yep, looks perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So I always have to come up with something, you know, I can't just do a straightforward title. So I call this Exploring Access Options, Partner-Assisted Scanning. Part of the reason that I did that was, let's see, try and forward here. There we go. Because today is thinking about different ways of accessing communication systems. And we will talk about some of the other ways other than partner-assisted scanning, just so you can have a context for what partner-assisted scanning is and where it fits in the bigger scheme of things. So this is a little bit of a chart, or kind of a sequence of today's webinar. We'll start talking more broadly about access, and then the different ways that we select, so our selection techniques. Within that, direct selection and scanning, and then within scanning, we'll focus quite a bit on the partner-assisted scanning part. According to the 5 steps, which is that structure we use to help kind of link all these webinars together, partner-assisted scanning is actually a skill that a person has, so it's not necessarily part of an educational system, but when we're working on it, teaching it and learning, then it's a target, it's a learning outcome. So that's what I put it under for today. My hope for today, and I think some of the other panelists and folks that are on the Angelman Syndrome Foundation committee, is sort of twofold. One is that folks will get a better understanding of what partner-assisted scanning is. It's a term that is certainly familiar to those in the world of AAC, but even there are many speech pathologists and others that are not familiar with the term, and I think it's sort of seen as something that is not necessarily relevant to more people, and it actually is. So let's find out a little bit more about what partner-assisted scanning is, and then move into the idea of seeing it less as a specialized kind of intervention and more as something that we can have in our toolbox that might be applicable to lots of folks. So that would be a nice outcome if people might try this, whereas otherwise they weren't considering that it was relevant. We're not going to talk about specific tools today. The nice thing about the selection techniques is that they're often mix and match, so you use different techniques for selection with all sorts of different materials. But if you're interested in the features of a robust communication system, then you want to go ahead and access the Does Your App Measure Up webinar, and I have information there about where you can find that. Okay, so let's get into that conversation about access, and I want to again kind of jump back to the tool and the access relationship. When you're doing an evaluation, say to determine an appropriate communication support, whether it be low-tech or high-tech, an app or a speech-generating device, access is the most important factor. So that's really where you start. So if the person cannot access, see, or interface with the communication system, then it doesn't matter what's on it. So that is where we start, is by thinking about what does this person need to receive information from the system and to generate information and respond with the system. So here's my little graphic about the things that I might ask. So what is the best way to present communication targets based on that person's physical and sensory skills? So there's the input side, which is a sensory experience, so seeing or feeling or hearing. And then there's that output side. So what supports might I need, people or things, to be successful? And how can I reliably and accurately indicate my selections? So that reliable and accurate indication of selections, that's our access. How am I going to tell you from this set of options which one that I want to pick for my communication message? This is just a little bit of a placeholder to show you some of the different selection sets, or say that input side. So how are we going to represent our messages is basically what this slide represents. And you can see there that you have some visual communication symbols there on a communication board right down in here. This is here to represent some of the spoken messages that you might use for a person as their communication set, say they're more auditorily based. This is a set of tactile symbols. And then you can also mix and match these. So I was with a young lady yesterday who she uses a visual system, but she relies on the auditory feedback for determining whether she got the right target or not. So she kind of combines the both in order to make sure she got to the right location on the display. So remember, any of these are possible in terms of the content of the materials that we're using, and they can be mixed and matched with the access techniques that we're going to talk about next. Okay, so what are our selection techniques? So we have a communication system, and now we have to have a way as a user to interface with that communication system. So our, let's see if my next selection techniques are going to be the ways in which I as a user select my communication targets. And we basically have two methods, and the first kind of broad category is called direct selection. And the name kind of says it all. Direct selection is when the person selects the target directly from the displayed set. So there's no intermediary steps, there's no kind of sequence. The available options are displayed all at the same time, simultaneously, and then the person uses some form of access to directly interface with that choice. So, oops, let me go back one. The two types of direct selection would be contact and non-contact. So touching or pointing with a finger or touching with your whole hand a display, that would be direct contact with the display, and that's, you know, we use that on iPads and books and things like that. But you can also use your eyes, and even though you don't make contact with the display, it's still a direct selection because you're, quote, navigating directly to the choice that you're making. Also speaking, so if you had, like, say, word recognition software, you could say exactly one word and it might expand it to a whole sentence. So it's a little bit more of an obscure method, but it is one of our indirect, our non-contact direct selection. So most of you are going to recognize the touching and the pointing, right? So that's what we're using with our core boards and our pod books and our iPad displays, etc. And those are great, and we're going to talk about sort of what makes direct selection using touching and pointing work well, and where do we sometimes have challenges that we kind of muddle through and then maybe we don't have to. So our other option for how we might select would be using indirect or scanning. So scanning or indirect selection requires a sequential presentation of the options before the user can then indicate their selection using their motor response. So remember before I said that direct selection, it's simultaneous. You see your options all at once. In scanning, there's some sort of sequence or timing, one after the other. You're presented with options in some way, and then you produce a signal, and that's your response, that has been your selection. When we look at that from a switch or an electronic perspective, the person who's using the switch controls the presentation of the options and then their selection of the targets. So I'll give you an example of a young lady I worked with a few years ago, quite honestly before I knew about partner-assisted scanning, and she would use a switch, and every time she hit the switch, her device would name the button that was highlighted for her. So she would go through like all of her lunch options, and every time she hit the switch, it would name the next item on the list. And if she heard the one that she wanted, she'd hit a different switch. and it would activate and say, yes, that's what I want. So she controlled the presentation because the switch would move her from one item to the next, and then she would control the selection. So she would hit it and it would speak. Interestingly, we're going to talk about some of the factors that that you want to look at with regard to scanning and knowing how to set that up. And this particular young lady, she might scan through the same set of options 7, 8, 9 times. And each time she was listening to a list of 6, 7, 8 items. But that was her process of going, let me hear what my options are, hear what my options are. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, is that there are individual preferences to how this works that we need to keep in mind. Okay, and then the last selection technique is going to be our partner-assisted scanning. So in PAS, or partner-assisted scanning, the partner is the one who presents the options and who kind of receives or responds to the user's motor signal. So the partner is intentionally using their knowledge of this person, of the environment, of the context, and they're adjusting the interaction to increase success. So one of the things I wanted to be sure to point out was that we want the partner to use information that they have at their disposal and use that to help us to be more successful. One of the differences between the partner-assisted scanning and the switch scanning is the switch scanning is not flexible. It's consistent and it's independent, but it's inflexible. If you sneeze and activate the switch at the wrong time, the switch doesn't know that, the system doesn't know that, it doesn't account for that, and it's going to move forward as if that was as valid a selection as anything else. So that can be really challenging for someone who has motor control issues or vision issues or other things that are going to impact their ability to make a selection. So think about, you suddenly get distracted and you miss your exit. Well, that can happen on a communication system. Somebody walks into the room, you kind of drift off and you come back and your system is scanning through and you've missed your choice. When you have a partner involved, they can allow for those types of variables, and they are expected to adjust, to wait, to move faster, to move slower, to kind of make all those kind of little adjustments that are going to help the partner, the person who's communicating, to be more successful. Mary-Louise, anything that you wanted to add around that kind of introduction to partner-assisted scanning?
No, it's brilliant, Maureen.
Oh, wow. I thought it might help to start, and I was actually kind of having fun with coming up with some of the real-life examples of how we actually use scanning and direct selection in our own lives. And again, I think direct selection is a little easier to visualize, but if we look, we will see that there are actually all sorts of types of scanning in our lives as well. So here we have our waiter at the table, and he's providing me with my options for salad dressing. Well, I can't directly jump into the middle of that list. I have to wait until he tells me the first, the second, the third item, and when I hear the one that I want, I say, oh yes, blue cheese, that's what I'd like. So he's doing auditory scanning. He's providing me with an auditory input, and I'm verbally recognizing, yes, that's the one that I want when he gets to that right one. There's an auditory scanning example. Now, when I sat down at the table and I ordered my salad and I opened up my menu, that would be an example of direct selection. I had all my options visible, and I could point to or say the exact one that I want, and I didn't have to go through a list of items that were presented to me in order to do that. So here I am in the restaurant, and I have both scanning and direct selection. Okay, so now I'm in the car, I'm headed home, and I want to listen to the radio. Two ways that I can do that. So the first way, I might use some of these numbered buttons, and I might go directly to one of the radio stations that I want to listen to. So if I say, oh yes, 87.9, and I press that button, I've directly selected the station that I want to listen to. If I wanted to listen to station 90.1, that's not one of the button options. I'm going to have to scan. I'm going to have to press the scan button, and let it scan through and kind of jump from one station to the next in sequence until I get to the one that I want, and then I will hit scan again and it will stop. That's an example of a scanning system. So both, again, direct select and scanning are part of something that we would do every day, or I do every day. When we use the remote control, we go through the channels with the channel changer, and we go, do I want to watch that? No, I don't. Oh, that? No, I don't. And I keep going until I find something I want, and then I stop changing the channel. That's an example of visual scanning. I'm looking, I may be listening, and then making a selection from the set. If I had my app, which had Xfinity on demand, and I could look at all of my TV shows on the display and tap the one that I want, that would be an example of a direct select. And I think this is the last one, real life. So here we have a keypad, and it's sort of two variations, but the same thing, where if I wanted to create a text, say I wanted to write the word hello, there's no method for me to directly go to the H. It's embedded within a larger set. So I actually have to hit the 4 twice in order to get the hello. So I'm sort of scanning through. The first time I hit the 4, it will give me a G, and I say, no, that's not what I want. And then I hit it again, it gives me the H, and I go, yes, that's what I want. So this is something that we do a little bit less now that some of us have the keyboard, which allows us to directly go to the letter, but some of us still have the Blackberries or things that you have to use the numbers, and in that case you have to go through a sequence in order to get to the one that you want. Okay, so let's see. I just dropped my examples here, but why don't let's see if I can pull this one up. So it's telling me we may have viruses. We don't care. Go to Google Chrome and see. Oops. I'm going to just end it so I can highlight it and go there. So I just wanted to have, actually I'm going to show you another video. I'm going to show you a video of me. I want you to have a context before we get into the decision making about partner assisted scanning, about what it looks like. So I'm actually going to show you an example of me working with a great young guy. He's not so young anymore. He's in high school. It's a little hard to hear on this video. It's just just under 2 minutes long. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a context for it. Let me just see. Okay. I'll enter full screen. Okay. So this is Joe. He has cerebral palsy, and this is him in 2nd grade. And he was just getting started with partner assisted scanning. And so this is one of the first sessions, and across the table his mom and his speech pathologist were sitting there, and we were showing them how we were getting started with partner-assisted scanning. So I have a bunch of letters on the table. I was picking up 3 letters one at a time, and I would tell him what each letter as I picked it up, and he would then signal which one he wanted when I presented them again with a little bit of a pause in between. So we were going to be doing just spelling a word together. I'm looking for a clear signal from him. I'm not looking for him to use the switches, which he has by his head. I am looking for him to signal to me, yes, that's the one I want. And what we're hoping to do is to get a more clear signal from him that that's been his selection. So let me play it, and then I'll see if I need to narrate anything else. Okay, so um, that for me is kind of classic partner-assisted scanning, where creating an opportunity for him to practice working on his signal while engaged in a meaningful activity. He clearly is enjoying it. I'm learning how to better determine, was that a yes or not? You saw on that last letter I said, was that a smile? You know, and so we're kind of learning each other. But think about Joe and look at his hands and arms and you know, at the head. Think about what he would have access to. Think about the alphabet. How else would he access the entire alphabet unless we had some way of minimizing the set and putting it in an order so that he could select from that, as opposed to an array where we thought, well, how many letters could he reach with his arm? You know, not many would be the answer to that. So in this way, he had access. You know, in this activity, I edited down the letters just to kind of, it was not a full spelling, but you can see where he now had access to information that he wouldn't otherwise have. So that's sort of the idea of the partner-assisted scanning. One thing to really remember when you're selecting communication technique for accessing the system is the primary purpose of a communication system is communicating. And when we are developing a system and figuring out how we're going to interface with it, the other, say, goals or agendas or you know, purposes that we may have, they have to go to the wayside temporarily, meaning the time that we're developing a communication system is not the time to embed taxing visual or physical demands, right? So yes, I might have, the OT may have jumped in and said, oh, I'd love for Joe to reach across the table to get things. That's great, and I would support that, but not as in terms of it compromising his communication system. So the #1 priority of a communication system is for communication. Whatever else has to kind of go away, we're going to do that because communication is too important to load it up behind motor or vision or hearing or other demands that we may have. So we are really aiming for what can we do to be most successful, and that may be some of the decision that you have to make along the way. If you can remember that and say, you know, yes, I support working on X, Y, and Z, but in this case, it will detract from his ability to communicate efficiently, effectively. So let's look at it to sort of contrast the two types of access, the direct selection and then the scanning. So if I am looking at a student and I want to know what access method they're going to use, I would look at these indicators and say, how closely does this profile match this student? So do they have consistent motor skills? So today, you know, their motor abilities are good across the day, throughout the day. They're pretty accurate, right? So they can get to a target and it's not ambiguous. Do they have very few mishits? So if they're going for this one target in a field of 20, how many times do they hit the ones that are around it versus that one target, right? How much time does it take for them to get to a target? So you saw with Joe, he takes a while to kind of get his body to, you know, like moving, and so sometimes you could even see him preparing to move, but everything's effortful for him. So I have to look at, like, how long would it actually take him to move his arm and get to a particular target? How much energy does it take? This is a huge factor, and partly because it's invisible, so we don't think about it as much, but how fatiguing is it to use this direct selection method? So particularly eye gaze, when people are using eye pointing, it seems, oh, we use our eyes. It is, can be extremely taxing to use your eyes to communicate, and again, it's invisible, so, but it's something we have to think about because that is a direct selection method. What about the other physical demands? So are they keeping their body upright? Are they using their eyes and their ears, and they may have cortical visual impairment, which Joe has, and that then takes effort. So thinking about that. And then maybe the most obvious indicator is how many symbols are they able to have on a display. So a good direct selector can use accurate, have accurate selection with good motor skills and a few mishits and a short latency, blah, 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 with a lot of symbols on the display. The fewer symbols that you get on the display in order to accommodate direct selection, the closer you are moving to scanning. So for me, it's one of the hallmarks. I went to see a young man yesterday, and the team said, well, he struggles with access, vision, and motor, so we can only put 4 items on his display. That, for me, is an immediate kind of jumping point to say, then we need to look at other options, including scanning, that is going to give him more success. Also think about if you can add some supports to make them more successful with direct selection. So if they're inaccurate with their point, could you add a key guard? Could you delay the key activation such that when they press a button, it doesn't activate immediately? There's a bit of a delay so that they don't have as many mishits. Can you use a stylus? Can you use space between targets? So this is, for both direct selection and for scanning, there are ways to improve accuracy and not just with the motor and sensory demands that you're given. There is a limit to that, right? So we can't make someone who's really challenged be completely accurate just with these things, but it might be helpful. So this is my common solution, right? So this is what we usually do is because of all of those factors, they're fatigued or they're not accurate, et cetera, we reduce the field, right? We'll say, well, let's give them the 4 items and then they'll be accurate. What we don't often do is sort of do a little bit of a, let's say like a looking ahead and saying, what would it take for them to be more accurate? And how likely is that to happen in X time frame? And if it doesn't happen, how long are they going to be stuck with this? Also, we don't think about the fact that if you only have 4 buttons on a page, how many pages are you going to have to put all of your symbols? And that's another cognitive load, etc. So this is me saying, I don't like that, and I think we can do better, and let's try something else. So let's look at some of the indicators for the partner-assisted scanning that either would be in lieu of, or I'm going to encourage folks to think of it in addition to. I honestly think, just as I showed you with the real-life examples, that there's a place for direct selection and partner-assisted scanning for all of us. It's a matter of kind of percentage of weight. How much do we put into one basket versus the other? But I think everyone can do both, and particularly opening up that partner-assisted scanning for folks who are not as good at the direct selection, but we're persevering, and it can be frustrating. That's what we'd like to see. So if direct selection is fatiguing, or they're making a lot of errors, or you dramatically have to reduce the quantity of the symbols in the set or display, or this is often the case where you need a very particular seating or setup for them to be accurate with direct selection, and that's not always available, or their performance is inconsistent, or their availability for that mode is inconsistent. So today they're not feeling great, so they're not as accurate, etc. Or they're impacted by contextual factors, which we all are, but some more than others. So if someone is accurate unless they're distracted, and they're distracted a lot, then that is something that we have to really take into consideration. So here, again, see the idea of combining the two into two kind of along this continuum. and being able to use that, the user and their availability. So are they available at this moment for this particular method? What about the learning context or the communicative context? What's the purpose of this interaction? All of those would go into the consideration of which form do we use if in fact we have more than one. Okay, so at the very basic, this is sort of a representation of what we said at the beginning. Partner-assisted scanning is kind of a simple, the partner presents the items and then they interpret a yes signal from the user. Yes, we can use more than one switch, such as the student I told you about, but I wanted to kind of keep it simple for this webinar, and we can direct you to more resources if you want to get into that. Here's an example of a script that I've used with some of my students where we put this with the communication support so that people know exactly how to do it. So start by saying listen, and then name and show each option, which you saw me do with Joe. Say now choose, and now they know it's their time to respond, and then you name and show each option in sequence, pausing an appropriate amount of time in between to allow for the response of the user. That's very individualized. Some need a long time. Some will forget what they're doing if it's too long, so you have to kind of tweak that. If you get a yes response, then you respond, oh, this is what you wanted to choose, and then you respond accordingly to whatever that choice was. If you don't get a response, then I would go back and repeat that process for the rest of the options, and then potentially repeating the whole list again. Again, I told you about that student who needed it multiple times. We also will, in an upcoming slide, maybe soon, talk about having an out, so being able to leave a set if there's nothing there that is of interest to you. So, Mary-Louise, anything so far jumping out at you?
The only thing, and I'm not sure if it's in a upcoming slide, just to remind everyone that the AAC learner does not have to have a clear yes or no for you to begin using partner-assisted scanning. That you can model an accept and reject yes and no method, and that the child will learn yes and no through you doing this. So it's not, I think that's where a lot of our learners get dismissed from partner-assisted scanning, because they don't have a clear yes and no when to start, but the kids soon learn.
Excellent reminder, yes. So there are no prerequisites to partner-assisted scanning. If you need to learn it to participate, then that becomes your first goal, is to, and it's through experience, right? How do you learn what your accept, reject, yes, no is? You learn it through using it. So thank you so much, Mary-Louise, for mentioning that. I'll just show a little bit. So this is Linda Burkhart with a little Emma, I guess, and she's going to just show you another version of partner-assisted scanning using a pod, so just to give you another perspective. So I don't know Emma, but I look at that and I think about Joe as well. And Joe did not have a reliable signal when we started, and he also, I did not evaluate him but I know that the speech pathologist did, and she would say, you know, tell me what your name is, and then she'd scan through options and he'd get it wrong. Thank goodness we did not use that as a gate to keep him out of using partner-assisted scanning, because fast forward to within a couple of years, and now he's using switches with an electronic device and forming sentences, etc. But if we had said, oh, I don't think you meant that, or you don't know what you're selecting, and stopped there, we would have precluded him from learning. The same thing with Emma. I don't know Emma, but I would say, looking at that clip, if her signals were not, so she was doing a little nod, right? So whether she meant to pick that or not, they're learning each other. So Linda's learning to read the yes, and Emma is learning what Linda's responding to. So through experience, she's going to go, oh, I get it. That nod is what makes this happen, and then she does more of that, right? So again, maybe that is already what she's doing, but not knowing her and knowing her signals, I'm not sure. So okay, so the signal, which how timely we're talking about, is just a specific movement for communication. It's very generic because it doesn't matter. Any physical movement that is under the user's control and can be recognized by the partner to indicate a selection can be a signal. Now you see the little star over there. This is kind of what Mary-Louise was just saying. Many times partner-assisted scanning is used as the vehicle for the person to develop control over that movement and for the partner to learn to recognize it. So even if you don't have that, that is not a reason to say, well, they can't do it. Many, many times that's what you're doing when you're starting off with partner-assisted scanning, is learning how to kind of learning each other and learning what that signal looks like and learning to have physical control over that. So that just a reminder of some of the things that we talked about with the partner-assisted, that the partner is that interface between the user and the materials, so that you can see Linda was flipping the pages. She was pointing to a set of options and naming them. She was navigating. She was kind of doing a lot of the things that Emma couldn't do, but that meant that Emma could focus on the message, and that was the most important thing that she could contribute. So we're trying to work cooperatively with the user to increase their speed and accuracy and success, and not influence that, right? So we want to be careful that we're not guiding in any way or moving them in a direction or influencing what they're saying, but we do need to work together, like, and again, that's appropriate. So these are some of the guidelines that came from Linda Burkhart and Gail Porter in their presentation at ISAC on partner-assisted communication. These are some of the things that the partner can offer over, say, a switch. So if there's unintended movement that a switch might pick up, a partner can ignore that, right? They can control the timing, as I said before. If they notice that they need to pick up speed because the person is fatiguing or they're losing attention, etc. They can look at their facial expressions and nonverbal cues and other things and reply to that. Now, I'll have a slide in a minute about how you might use that. They can use contextual cues. That's huge, right? So being able to use the environment to help make meaning out of that conversation. You know, even Linda saying, "Oh, you just had a nap." You know, she had information, and then helping to resolve problems. So, boy, the folks that we work with or live with struggle to just get their basic communication happening in a day. And if there are things that we can do to make that easier, boy, I'm just so thrilled to be able to do that as a partner. This is just a screenshot of someone using the alphabet and offering visual choices to this student, and then ostensibly the student is going to provide some sort of signal the partner will recognize to select one of those letters or to turn the page for another set of letters, and that will be how he's going to use that for writing, which is what Joe and I were doing. Okay. These are just some of the things that you might want to think about when you're getting started with partner-assisted scanning. They're, again, not prerequisites, but decisions in some cases. So how many items are you going to list in a row before, you know, it's considered a set? So like my salad dressings, you know, how many items could he list before I would forget? You don't want to start with a lot, like 1 or 2 is a good place to start. How many times are you going to cycle through before you say, okay, there's no choice, and then what? What are the names you're going to be using? So oftentimes we're either using auditory scanning, so naming items, or auditory plus a visual. So either way, there's an auditory component. If you have really lengthy titles for things, those are going to be hard to offer as a choice. They need to be kind of more succinct, or at least be able to be presented in a succinct way. So thinking about that. And then there's that something else, having as part of the set of options an out, so that they're not required to pick one of the things that you selected. There's a way for them to say, what I want isn't here, or I don't want to choose something, or some way of getting out of that loop. The motor signal, you can use one signal. Again, you can use more than one that can speed things up, but there are some other issues associated with a yes and a no. We're not going to talk about that, but you want to define what the signal looks like, see how clear it is, see what the difference is between when you present the item they want to choose and when they actually produce the motor signal. So some kids have seconds and seconds and seconds and seconds, and suddenly you see the response, but they need all that for motor planning. One of the big things, again, that is hard to see but is important is, can they inhibit the motor signal? So you could see maybe with Joe, if you remember, he kind of had an overflow. Sometimes he'd get going with his smile and it would kind of overflow, and it would be hard for him to stop doing that when he then needed to be listening and looking again. So being able to not use your motor signal when you don't need it is as important as being able to use it when you do need it. And then again, sometimes you have that, what if there's no response, and you want to have that written out. I think this is my last section, so that we can see what Mary-Louise has. We want to be clear about what signal you're looking for, and it can help to articulate that. So, oh, I think I see you smiling, or oh, I heard your voice, or whatever it is. I have found that looking for multiple signals at the same time can be difficult for everyone. So if I say, well, he might raise his hand, and he might vocalize, and he might try and point, and he might, I'm confused, and I imagine that the person who's communicating with me is confused as well, because they're running sort of these different motor plans. So we have actually worked on kind of collecting some data and to identify which signal is most consistent or reliable, and trying to encourage that, or 1 or 2. But just bear that in mind, that if you have a whole bunch of potential things, that isn't necessarily better. It can be worse. So again, use direct and partner-assisted scanning. If you make a mistake, I did a lot of partner-assisted scanning with my mom, who had a Parkinsonian condition, and we would have this little checklist, and I'd start with like 3 questions. Is it about right now? Is it about something that already happened, or is something going to happen? And then I'd go a little decision tree. So if I thought I saw her say yes, and I moved on, and then I saw her expression change, I might say, I don't think I got that right. Let's go do that again. That's okay. You can do that. Just do it in response to kind of what they tell you, so that you're responding to something they're indicating through their expression or whatever. What you don't want to do is, I'm going to just jump ahead to say, what you don't want to do is get caught in a spiral of was it or wasn't it, right? So I almost did that with Joe, where I said, did you smile? This is a black hole of energy, because you're looking for this very, maybe a small motor signal, maybe it's just emerging, and you think you see it, and so you wait and you go, was that it? And now some time is passing between when they produce the signal and what you're going to do next. And then you might ask them, was that it? Did you do it? You've now added all sorts of other elements into this interaction that don't belong there, and the child's ability to make meaning of what happened is really reduced now. So my rule of thumb is, if you think it's a yes, it's a yes. If your instinct was, I think I saw that, move right with that. And if you made the mistake, then again, go back and correct it, but try not to get into, it is really a very awkward spiral. You never get clarification. It just makes things more confusing. Let's see. I'm just going to go. Don't ask for repetition. Can you show me that again? Don't do that. Just take what you take. If it's clear enough for you to recognize it, take it, and over time you're going to get clearer signals. But asking for someone to, quote, communicate on command, it really doesn't get us to where we want to go. And then again, there's my verbal identification. Oh, I saw you do this, I saw you do that. One of the very important things about partner-assisted scanning, or honestly any scanning, is keeping the set items, so that the options in the same order. So if I were to, change up the order of on your CD, you would immediately recognize, wait a minute, that song doesn't come after that song. These songs are supposed to come in this certain order. We learn the sequence of things, and for someone who's waiting for something that's coming up and going to say, oh, I'm waiting for my, for my salad dressing choice or whatever's coming next, they can start to predict because it's in the same order. If that order changes, there's no prediction, and then there's no preparation. And particularly if they need to get their body ready to make that signal, they have no preparation to do that. Suddenly, it's right upon them. That's it. And then sometimes they can't get their body moving in time. So in order to have those motor and language patterns, let's really keep those in the same order. Okay. So
Maureen,
yeah.
can I just add probably two things that I've just thought of to add to the do's and don'ts is that don't scan the list like a series of questions. We hear this a lot when people are scanning a child's pod book, or if they're scanning a child's prolo quo, if the child's having a tricky time and the parent switches to scanning. The words might be uncomfortable, tired, sick. So rather than just saying uncomfortable, tired, sick, the adult will say, are you uncomfortable? Are you tired? Are you sick? Now the child might be waiting for sick. When they hear the parents say, are you uncomfortable? They go, well, yes, I am. That's not the one I want, but yes, I am. Are you tired? Yes. So suddenly they've had all these other things in their head of, well, I am tired, but actually I'm trying to tell you that I'm sick. So it's not a series of questions. It's not going either. You're not saying the words as a question with an inflection in your voice. You're not going uncomfortable, tired, sick, and you're not saying, are you uncomfortable, are you tired, are you sick? You're simply reading the words that are there. One thing I've found is really helpful for families when they're learning to do partner-assisted scanning with their children is to listen to how a computer or a speech-generating device scans, because you need to scan in an objective voice. You need to hear what a computer sounds like when it's scanning, because that's what you need to do. You need to be the human computer who is completely objective, so you're not giving subjective little clues about what word you might need. And I hear it a lot during Mother's Day activities, Father's Day activities, Christmas activities, anytime a child's meant to be writing a card, and I'll hear the assistant or the therapist scanning the child's chat page, and you know that the adult is looking for the child to say I love you on their card, and so you hear go away, I love you, excuse me. And so the child might not want to say any of those, but suddenly they're getting all these hints in the adult's body language, in the inflection of the voice. And if the child does say yes to that column, so they want to say go away, then you'll hear that and see the staff do things like go away, and they don't want the child to say that, so they'll quickly not wait for the child to indicate yes to that one. They'll quickly move on to I love you, and they'll pause for longer on that one as if to say, come on, this is the one you want. So what we need to do is be completely objective as much as possible, giving the same time to each word, that we've all worked out that this is either the latency time, this is the time it takes for her to process, for her to get her body going, but that we scan like a computer, because you know, ideally we want children to have high tech and light tech if that's possible. So supporting families to understand what it is like to hear a speech generating device scan. And knowing that you are now the human computer and you simply read out those words in a flat scanning voice and you try and get a rhythm going as you're doing it. And then you and the child get into that rhythm together and they can start to predict, as Maureen said, where that word's coming up. So they're probably the two things that we have to problem solve the most with families who are with and classrooms that are doing partner-assisted scanning, is not making it a series of questions and not subtly influencing that child's communication in any way.
That's great. Did you want to share your slides? Now would be fine if you had those, Mary-Louise.
No, I think what I'll do, Maureen, is I'll just add in the ASF group about, I get a lot of questions about because the alternative access pod templates aren't out yet, the partner-assisted scanning pod templates, because we didn't talk about specific systems during this, there are a lot of partner-assisted scanning capable systems out there. So I don't want to talk about that now, but I will put in the ASF group how you can adapt, how Gail Porter has written into the direct access POM templates, how you can adapt them for scanning. So I'll put that in the group as a little PDF.
Wonderful. I did include also a couple of slides, and there was a webinar out of Cincinnati, which I thought, oh, I wish I had done that webinar. But it's in the resources. It's just 10 minutes, but it's a really nice kind of snapshot about partner-assisted scanning. And then I did also put some of the PDFs that are kind of often referred to around this topic. And I do have some other kind of handout resources that I use with teams that I will make available through the Facebook page. Yeah, so I do want to thank the Angelman Syndrome Foundation Communication Training Series folks, the foundation and the Foster Family Charitable Foundation, for helping us to make this possible. So both of those groups have come together so that these webinars are possible, and we truly appreciate that, because these are tremendous vehicle for sharing information. And I don't know if there are questions, but I'm happy to take them now or in the Facebook group. Folks want to do that.
We don't have any questions yet, but people might be typing away, so we can wait a minute to make sure.
So while people might be typing, I'm just going to say, so I work across the state of Vermont and have lots of different folks that I come across, and I was really surprised as I went back and I thought, well, who have I done partner-assisted scanning with? And it has been a really broad range of folks with no one particular profile. And like I said, I really see it as another tool and sort of using it more or less, not an either or. And I have some folks like Joe that went on to use electronic scanning, and I have others that have improved their direct selection. I had one 3-year-old that clearly needed lots of language, but all she could do was use her open hand, and I gave her 120 symbols on a display, and everybody thought I was crazy, but I said, you know what, for a year we'll use partner-assisted scanning and get her used to where things are and see if her direct selection improves. And within a couple of months, she was able to access one of 120, targets on a page, because we gave her that, time and experience. So that was that, not loading up her language behind her vision or motor demands, and she was able to learn that. But in the meantime, the family and such were using partner scanning with the high-tech system. So.